My name is Judith Rolls, and I'm the Senior Associate Director for Alumni and Family Engagement at Davidson College. And we are thrilled to welcome each of you to this back to school class featuring Mary Brown, class of 16, Sophia Cunningham, class of 16, and Yancy Fouché, our Director of Sustainability for Davidson College. In a moment, we'll turn the program over to our presenters for further introductions. But before we do, I just want to do a few quick Zoom keeping announcements. First, all participants have been muted, and we ask that you please remain muted throughout the event so that we can hear our presenters this evening. Excuse me. If you're comfortable with it and have not already changed your Zoom name to your first and last name, we ask that you might do so now. You can rename yourself by clicking the participants button at the bottom of your screen, hovering your mouse over your name, and then clicking the more or the ellipsis 3 dots button. And if you have a Davidson class year, feel free to add that as well. If you have questions for our presenters throughout the program, please feel free to post them using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see the chat button, you may need to click the More button first. The presenters will do their best to answer as many questions as possible during our formal Q&A portion of the call towards the end. If you have any technical or other issues, please also post them in the chat. We'll be watching them during the call to make sure that everyone can participate accordingly. Finally, we have enabled the live auto transcription for this call. If you'd like to enable it on your end, you can click the Show Closed Caption or CC button on your screen and subtitles should appear. Please note that the captions are not always accurate, so we appreciate and ask for your understanding. And now for our program. We have two fantastic alums with us from the Davidson College class of 2016 as our panelists this evening. First, we have Mary Brown. Mary has spent her career building bridges between new ideas and real-world impact, taking a winding road from consulting to leading clean energy innovation programs at Wells Fargo, and now as a principal at Realize 2050, a Denver energy consultancy, where she helps promising clean energy technologies find their footing in the market. Next, we have Sophia Cunningham. Sophia has spent her career in the different facets of energy and economic development, learning the key components that make economies thrive. She's now Executive Director of the Houston Energy Transition Initiative at the Greater Houston Partnership, the Houston region's principal business and economic development organization. Houston is called the energy capital of the world, and HETI is focused on strengthening the region's ability to produce more energy while lowering emissions. Moderating our panel tonight is Yancy Fouché. As Director of Sustainability for Davidson College, Yancy Fouché has led Davidson's sustainability strategy, action, and engagement since 2016. Her favorite work connects students, alumni, faculty, and staff with one another, with nature, and with neighbors, and with industry professionals to drive positive change. And I am now pleased to turn this program over to Yancy.
Yeah, thanks, Judith, and thanks so much to all of you for joining tonight. It's wonderful to see some familiar faces and some new names as well. One of my favorite parts of this job, honestly, has been getting to know and just be so impressed and humbled by the strength of Davidson graduates and the work they're doing in the world. So it's a gift to be able to share these two amazing alumni with you tonight and their stories. I'd be remiss, though, if I didn't start with a few updates for those who may not be familiar with some of the priorities and latest news out of Davidson's sustainability. So the college certainly recognizes that fluency and efficacy in sustainability topics are key to leadership and service in today's world. And so Davidson students have experiences across their 4 years that equip them for environmental leadership. And those happen in the classroom, they happen in residence life, they happen out in the local community, even at abroad. There's a number of ways that the experience incorporates thinking and reflection and practice on these topics. And this summer is a really exciting year for sustainability on campus. Two big milestones that we're marking this year. One is that the Sustainability Scholars Program, which is a cohort-based summer internship program that places students with partners here in the Charlotte region, celebrates its 15-year anniversary. So we have a lot of wonderful grads who have come out of that program and are doing important impact work around the country. So we'll celebrate 15 years of that as well. We're launching 2 big renewable energy projects this year. So one is on site, that will be a solar parking canopy that will be erected this summer in the Baker parking lot. And that will power about 5% of campus electricity needs. And it'll be complemented by the much larger offsite project where we've partnered with 8 other higher education institutions to invest in a solar project in Kentucky. And that will meet 100% of the electricity needs of campus. So a really big commitment that's helping us move towards our goal of a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by this year, actually, and then figuring out what's next. So I hope that you'll stay in touch with campus, with each other, with Davidson Sustainability and these efforts as they evolve in the coming years. And tomorrow you'll be receiving an email or sometime this week from Judith and team with follow-up about how you could do that. And I welcome you to, engage in the ways that make the most sense for you. One particular highlight is that if you're an alum on this call, there will be a sustainability weekend in the fall where our office, working with College Relations and with Davidson Outdoors and the Department for Environmental Studies, will be welcoming alumni from all class years, all majors and interests while you are on campus, back to campus to engage with each other on some of these topics and experiences here. But moving now to help share the stories, help them tell their stories. Sophia and Mary, thank you so much for Zooming in with us tonight, especially as a fellow mom. I want to give a shout out because they both have young ones who are being sequestered in different parts of the house. So we appreciate you being here in the evening hours, especially. But just tell us a little bit first, and either one of you can start with this one. What was your Davidson experience like? We didn't mention you were both English majors, so I'll bury the lead there. But beyond that, what were you involved with on campus? What are some of your favorite memories?
I'll jump in because I'm not sure why I went off mute, but thank you for having us, Yancy. And it's always fun to see everyone. So Mary Brown, class of 2016. Davidson was great. It was smaller than my high school, which I think gave me a bit of a different experience potentially. I was attracted to Davidson for strong athletics. I ran my freshman year, and also because I thought I was going to be pre-med, but loved the flexibility that the school provided, which is good because I did not run all 4 years, became a club rower, and also was an English major. So flexibility is good. I loved my English seminars, anything with Randy Nelson or Kuzmanovich or Fackler. But also had a lot of other courses that I really enjoyed. What else did I do? I was a volunteer Spanish teacher, studied abroad in Copenhagen. Feel like I really got to explore a lot of different opportunities through Davidson. Yeah, that was my experience.
Thanks so much, Mary. I'm so glad I get to connect with you tonight. And Yancy, thanks for facilitating this, and Judith for having us. Sophia Cunningham, class of 2016. My Davidson experience was certainly very rigorous, as is anyone else's. I too was pre-med for a brief period of time, but definitely kind of came in wanting to go into English and stuck with it throughout my time at Davidson. Like you mentioned, just the professors are world class, and Randy Nelson ended up being my advisor. I know he's retired now, but I have a very distinct memory of sitting in his office during office hours, and I was trying to decipher a story and develop a paper on it that had some level of original thinking to it. And I just remember him saying very directly to me, "You're smart, now think." And that is just something that always stuck with me as, we are smart people, we can use our brains, but we have to really think to move something forward. And it was also very encouraging for me too. So that's one of my great Davidson memories, and then developed lifelong friends and relationships through my time at Davidson. And then finally, the last thing I would just say is I got to where I am in my career very much because of Davidson. My first job out of college was through a Davidson Impact Fellowship, which placed graduates into not-for-profit roles around the country and a little bit internationally as well. And so that was a huge part of me getting my start at the Greater Houston Partnership, and it's where I've stayed since then.
Yeah, I love that quote, Sophia, that there was a panel on campus last night about AI and how we should think about balancing that new innovation with sustainability considerations. And so a lot of thinking about thinking went on last night as well. Great. And I had a question when I first met Mary and Sophia and heard they were the same class year. They were both English majors. They're both doing this energy work. I was like, they must have been best friends, and they've just, stayed so tight all these years. And as we were prepping, they said, "What? We've stayed in touch off and on." They reconnected at a conference, and we'll reconnect when you come back to campus as well. So I love that sort of both work and the Davidson Point of Connection are helping people to re-engage throughout the years and maintain those relationships. But Mary, I want to go to you on this one as we start to think about career pathways. So in the first decade of your career, you worked in consulting in a few different contexts, and you worked in a major financial services firm. A through line, though, is that your roles have always involved business strategy. And over those years, you've evolved to increasingly focus on innovation in climate and energy. So 2 questions. I'll share the first and can repeat the second later if that's helpful. So first, what factors drove your focus in this direction over time? And then I'd love for the audience to hear what you find most satisfying about your current work.
Yeah.
So first, what factors led you to sort of make those changes and refine your pathway?
So it turns out I just really love a heavily regulated industry, whether it's healthcare, financial services, or insurance or utilities. Apparently, that's the work that I like to do. But jokes aside, I think what I figured out pretty soon after graduating was that I was pretty good at navigating really large organizations in complicated regulatory environments. A lot of that requires skills that we built to Davidson. So finding the right person, speaking the language, understanding different groups' incentives, balancing business realities with various stakeholders. And the more time that I spent doing that, the more that I realized there's a lot of overlap with skills you need for innovation work as well. A lot of times it's just helping different stakeholders find shared ground. So I started doing some of that work at Wells Fargo. Wells had stood up a brand new sustainability team, needed someone who understood the business and could actually speak their language to get kind of new skeptical stakeholders on board with the work that we were doing. And I raised my hand. So admittedly did not have a ton of sustainability experience, but learned on the job, especially what it meant to be doing that at a very large financial institution. And then I think your second question, Nancy, was about what I find satisfying about it. Kind of a story that relates to that. So one of the big things that I was doing at Wells was managing our clean tech strategic partnerships and finding ways to use those like kind of exciting things that we could do to illustrate what our bankers could be doing for clients' needs. So we had it still exists, but there's a rather large program that was a partnership with one of the national labs. And most of the bank didn't know it existed, which was sort of embarrassing. It was a rather expensive and award-winning program. So I inherited that and pretty quickly took it on a roadshow to remind people that this existed, was alive, and then found ways to make it even more relevant to what we cared about, which was what do our clients need? And how could we finance that with the products and services that a bank could provide? So kind of illustrates what I find fun about the type of sustainability and climate work that I've been doing is how do you keep innovation from kind of hiding in a corner? And similarly, how do you keep sustainability initiatives from being sidelined? Like how can you bring them into the mainstream, make them exciting and relevant, and bring more people into the coalition? That's what I find really fun.
Great, thank you. And I know we have some current students on the call as well, so hopefully in Q&A they can dive a little deeper with both of you on this pathway question. So Sophia, for you, your career also has progressed from what I would consider more generalist work to an emphasis on the energy transition. So in your case, though, a difference is that your progression has occurred within one organizational context. And your work's rooted in workforce development and public policy. And we should congratulate Sophia. She just got a promotion within the organization. So even, very recent progression within that work. So talk to us about the same questions here. What factors led you to, that organization start and to stay over time? And then what do you love about your work?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to Mary of just taking on complex challenges, figuring out the right stakeholders that need to be brought in and involved in decision making throughout the process, being able to conceive of a project from start to finish. But I will say, kind of another key piece for me was just finding interesting, great people to work for. And so that was certainly true when I started at the partnership and is still true today. I just had the opportunity to find people who are doing really interesting work and say, I really want to work with you. So that was really special. And along the way, I worked in workforce development, primarily on addressing what's called the middle skill gap, where you're trying to get people who are underemployed into roles that require more than a high school diploma, but less than a 4-year degree, working in all the big sectors of the Houston area economy. Then I moved over to our public policy team, covered local, state, federal issues, all of our policy communications. Anytime we were speaking to legislators or commenting on public policy. And then at the time when I ended my time there, I handled our energy policy portfolio, our transportation portfolio, and our flood mitigation portfolio. So that was really interesting, but it was wearing a lot of different hats all at once. And for me, energy was the most interesting. Like Mary said, it's a highly regulated industry as well. So there's lots of complex policy to consider. It's also just kind of the thing that enables our civilization. And if we think about global population growth, there's 1 billion people on the planet that have access to good energy reliably. And then another 7 billion that are trying to get there. And so for me, it just became a very important pressing issue. And for Houston, its economy is so centrally tied to that. So there's a lot of interesting people moving projects forward and exciting opportunities, both in the traditional energy space and the lower carbon space. I'd say what's most satisfying about my work today is we work with a whole host of energy companies, as well as consumers of energy. And we think through the complex challenges of how do you take the existing energy system and work towards solutions that also reduce emissions while also producing more energy from all resources. And so we look at complex challenges that all of our member companies are going to face when they move a project forward, whether that's public policy issues, finance issues, community acceptance, all of those sorts of challenges, and then work to address those in a systematic way.
Great, thank you. I'm noticing a lot of themes in sort of the type of work that you all are doing. And Mary, you talked about the need to sort of let people know a program exists or a subject area. And Sophia, bringing people together from very different walks of life and career perspectives and policy perspectives around new and challenging topics. So when you all think about this consensus building that you've done in different contexts, what ties do you see back to specific skills, experiences, classes perhaps at Davidson, and or maybe skills that you've worked to cultivate since you graduated?
Yeah. I'm curious how this will resonate with you, Sophia, but I think I was thinking about this earlier, and I think a lot of it goes back to seminars and even like the 101 level classes that we had outside of English at Davidson. You learn pretty quickly that like the fastest way to a bad reputation is showing up unprepared and asking questions that waste everyone's time. And it sounds harsh, but it's really true. I think some of my best Davidson class experiences, they certainly had to do with professors and subject matter, but it was having really engaged classmates who'd show up and keep each other accountable, like think harder, listen better, articulate more precisely. Really like a cultural of mutual accountability has stuck with me. And I think in a career context and in a coalition building context, it's kind of the same lessons of like, if you want people to listen to what you have to say, do your homework, show up prepared. Um, Acknowledge that like actually there might be some bad questions. Like think about how you want to use people's time, and they'll probably be more respectful of yours as well. Um, and then I think the I'm rolling my eyes because the close reading skills that absolutely got drilled into us as English majors, like, yes, those help. Like when it comes to how am I going to speak to someone in X group versus Y group about like a new concept or something quite complicated, whether it's policy or technology, um, figuring out like the right frame or the precise word or even the right medium, like, yeah, that's a lot of Davidson coming through with English class lessons.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that. So I had a manager who was also a Davidson alum at one point, and he approached me after I had sent him an email that I'm sure I was proud of. And he said, "You're a good writer, but you need to learn how to write for business." And so that was helpful. And I had other lessons from mentors along the way. Like one said, assume that somebody's only going to read the first paragraph. So all of the important information needs to be there. And those types of little lessons were helpful because they helped me understand, okay, how do I need to speak differently when I'm talking to a technologist or a heavy researcher at a national lab, and then I'm talking to somebody who scouts talent for a corporate venture, or talking to somebody who leads the whole business or enterprise. What are the different levels of communication, and at what point do I need to bring those different levels of people in to make a decision on something that we're developing, or a piece of work, or a report or something like that, and then be able to drive that towards a consensus agreement amongst our members and stakeholders. Because the great thing about Houston is that you have fierce competitors who are willing to sit side by side and work on something that's mutually beneficial for them all. The challenge is that you have a variety of opinions that you all have to manage and understand, how do we shape this and ask the right questions that lead towards a consensus at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm going off script with this one a little bit. So no pressure if this question doesn't resonate with you. But building on that too, I'm reflecting on Davidson as a residential campus where beyond the sort of academic skills, deep relationships are formed, right? And so you all, I'm understanding how you're thinking about approaching people in general terms, but what about the personal relational aspect? And maybe Sophia, especially for you being in one place and one organization for a while, are there themes in which you're like, oh, people, the formula for working with people is X, or things you're looking for to tailor your engagement to bring people along to an initiative?
So when I talk with folks who are kind of building their networks and those sorts of things, and I'm still doing this myself, it's just one of the key themes is just time and investment of time. You can't build a relationship overnight, and there's a whole lot of work that goes into it. And it always helps if you can learn from somebody who's really great at it. But I would say, sometimes it's sharing a report that you read that you thought was interesting that might apply to somebody. And other times it's sharing resources or information. Other times it's having a Zoom session because their time is valuable and you only need to take 30 minutes. And sometimes it's a longer conversation where you talk about things beyond just that one discrete project. So I would say it's a mix, but I always kind of try and approach it of how can I make sure that I'm meeting their needs and their priorities as well as what's best for Houston, which is what we're focused on at our company, as well as how do I continue to invest in that relationship over time, knowing that they're going to give a whole lot back in terms of their time, expertise, and thought if that relationship is there.
Anything you would add on that, Mary? Thanks, Sophia.
Yeah, I think one other thing that comes to mind, and it's something that I learned probably a few years into my career after they weren't Davidson alumni managers, but they're pretty tough regardless, was that once you've developed a sense of communication that works, like your version of the means that meets whatever ends, you can have style. And I don't know. I say this because I think having a sense of humor can also be kind of helpful as you're building and sustaining relationships in a professional setting. And like 21-year-old me probably would have balked at that and like blushed. But I think it helps to kind of bring your full self forward in a professional way. But figuring out like what your authentic voice is and then just maintaining it. Like if it works, just keep working it. Um, Saved me a lot of angst about 5 years into my career. Yeah.
Great.
And allow me to have conversations with other people once I like eased up. They're like, all right, cool, human. We can
Yeah.
talk about more than just like the subject at hand, which was actually quite helpful for me.
It's so
I think
fun
Mary's
that-
always had a very good, dry sense of humor.
Well, I don't know about good, but it's been dry.
That sounds fun. Yeah, it's always so fun watching students have those little tiny aha moments too of like, oh wow, this person, despite their title, is human, and they
Right.
they laugh at jokes and they have a family and whatever it may be.
Uh-huh.
Very relatable.
Yeah.
So Mary, I love the image of your 21-year-old self. So as I'm looking back at sort of your experiences, they go beyond just the professional paid work to, pretty heavy involvement through the years with community service. So you've been involved with service ranging from literacy, tutoring, to serving on an advisory council with a public media organization, to board service for a statewide clean tech accelerator. So when you navigate these opportunities that may come your way or you may seek out, how do you think about this unpaid work in relationship to your personal and professional mission? And do you have a strategy for when to say yes or no to these new opportunities?
Yeah, I definitely think about them differently, whether it's like related to my career or kind of like a professional network versus if it's just not at all. For the professionally relevant roles like the Colorado Clean Tech Board that I sit on, and other advisory positions, usually the test is like, it sounds selfish, but it's worth it because it is unpaid. Am I actually getting something real in return for the time and resources that I'm putting into this? And that might be, am I actually meeting new people? Like a lot of people in the clean energy space tend to run in the same circles. Like, is this actually a new circle of people? Or is this just familiar faces each time? Am I hearing perspectives I wouldn't otherwise encounter? But for me, like that particular experience being on the board of Colorado Clean Tech has been great for broadening my network, broadening and deepening my network here. Because previously my role was focused on a national remit. So despite being in Colorado and working with a lot of other Colorado people, I didn't as much know the local landscape. So for me, that was really great. I got to be involved in standing up the first statewide climate week in the country, which was pretty cool. For non-professional service, it's a bit of a simpler test of like, is this whatever I'm doing actually helping someone? And do I feel better after each time I show up? In a kind of corporate setting in the energy space, you're not usually doing a lot of like one-on-one coaching or teaching. And I figured out pretty quickly after graduation that I missed that. Like I mentioned, doing the volunteer Spanish teacher thing at Davidson, there wasn't a clear way of shoehorning that into my 8 to 6, not 9 to 5. But in Charlotte, I was a reading buddy for a second grader. Showed up every week, made reading books a bit more exciting, built some trust. And then in Denver, I connected with a local school in 2021 and was working with a high school senior who'd fallen a bit behind during COVID virtual classes and needed some help staying on track to graduate. And we built a plan together for his remaining and makeup assignments and then just plugged through it until he crossed the finish line. So different ages and different stakes, but I think the through line has been like showing up consistently for a kid and making something hard feel a little bit more doable. That's just not something that I get to do in my day-to-day work. That volunteer work is a really great way of making that happen.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And, I love also watching alumni throughout the arc of their careers and their lives, sometimes even after retirement, find ways to integrate their passions, be it, personally, professionally, in civic life, et cetera. So it's great to hear those stories and reflections. Sophia, I want to talk with you a little bit about post-secondary education. So a few years ago, you decided to pursue a master's degree in energy management and systems technology, and that was after you'd been working for a while. So how did it go balancing graduate study with work? If is that something you would recommend to others? And what benefits have you seen to your career? Hopefully there have been some.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to comment on one thing that Mary said too. You know, I was talking with a fellow Davidson alum once, and she was kind of saying that she did some pretty extensive career typing work in a number of years ago, and found, kind of working with a coach, that there can often be three big needs that someone has in their career. And it might be a need for connection, or a need for impact, or a number of other issues. And so she said it's actually very rare that you can get all of those three kind of key secret ingredients in one job. And so I love the stories of your kind of civic and engagement, as well as means to kind of fulfill those, and make sure that you're meeting those needs.
Thank you.
On my master's degree, yeah, I mean, I pretty early into my work at Hetty, I kind of decided, this is where I want to be. I want to be in the energy industry long term. It's just at the nexus of so many interesting critical challenges in our world. And it's so key to enabling kind of everything else. We're talking a whole lot in the industry right now about energy's role in enabling the US's competitiveness in AI and data center races. And so I think that for me, taking the master's on was really just a means to kind of bolster my credentials in the industry, and then give me a little bit more technical grounding in a variety of key parts of the energy industry. And so that was really interesting, because I got to learn about power markets and how those work, as well as renewables and traditional oil and gas, and then what are the new kind of low carbon technologies that are developing and getting into the marketplace. And so that was interesting, because it was, I guess, the most liberal artsy version of a technical degree, where it pulled in classes from the business school, the law school, and the schools of engineering. It was a great experience. I definitely couldn't have done it without a good, strong support system with my family. Taking a master's degree on while also working, while also having a child who's less than a year old, is not for everybody. But I'm glad I got to do it, and it just helped to be able to continue to work as well.
Great. I don't know if liberal artsy is a word, but it should be. And, let's coin it tonight, if not. So that's great. So Sophia, we've talked a little bit, very high level about your all's reflections on your careers, et cetera. But as you were mentioning, sort of, the trends in energy and AI and competitiveness for the US, let's talk a little bit more about the substance of your work, and what are some of the major trends beyond the one you've just discussed, or you can elaborate on that you all are seeing in your industry. And are you thinking, and if so, how are you thinking about positioning your own work and contributions according to those trends?
So I am probably not going to make any policy predictions or market forecasts. I think the last month is like a really great illustration of why. I don't know. I think big picture though, I'm personally really interested in, like, agnostic of any particular administration, how much attention is now on a topic that for most people most of the time is completely invisible. Like Sophia, you were hinting at this of like energy is the thing that moves the world. Like there's a reason the word power is what it is. Um, like energy is always there until it's not. And I would expect the current attention on affordability and reliability to only grow, like especially as more data centers come online or are announced to come online, and put real pressure on the grid. So I think personally, that's what I'm keeping an eye on. I think there's like a real and significant political movement building there. I'm also in Colorado, so I'm watching geothermal closely. There's still real advances happening, so that's positive news, even if it's quiet. And then also like wildfire preparedness and mitigation, they feel very present this year. There's quite a lot of innovation happening here in Colorado, but also just all over the West. And it's this interesting overlap between utilities, state and local agencies, and everyone who lives in a wildfire risk area or even downstream of it for smoke. Um, so that's where I'm seeing a lot of interesting and urgent work. Sophia, do you want to talk about what you're seeing trend-wise before we talk about implications for both of our careers?
Sure, sure.
Okay.
So I would say that the founding of HEDI kind of really went back to a fundamental observation is that energy production continues to grow over time globally. However, at the same time, it does not require the same number of people that it once did to extract those resources or even more resources. And so, for us as an economic development organization, which is kind of the basis of our DNA at the Greater Houston Partnership, we viewed this as very important to the development of the energy industry and the Houston economy overall. Is what is going to be that next source of growth? And you know, some of the folks in our organization talk about it too in terms of the shale revolution that happened largely out of Houston, where companies were developing and forming very quickly in kind of the early 2000s range. And that being a huge source of fuel for our economic development as a region. And overall, that growth is just not quite what it used to be. And so as that kind of incumbent industry matures and continues to grow, but with needing a little bit fewer people, we need to think about where is that next source of growth and company formation coming from. And so we look broadly into the space of energy and clean and climate tech. That being said, it is not easy to build a clean or climate tech ecosystem. These are still relatively expensive technologies that need to come down the cost curve in terms of technology maturation and then commercial scale deployment. And so, like Mary, like you said, that nexus of affordable, reliable, over time cleaner, or lower carbon, as we refer to it, is very, very critical. I think that you're going to see pendulums swing back and forth, but these investments are all made over a long time horizon. So durable policy matters, the ability for companies to make investment decisions that are on a multi-year basis, so it matters, and then community acceptance to move these projects forward when they do come also really matters.
Great. Yeah, and any thoughts on that second part of the question from either of you? If not, that's fine. About shifts you've made or maybe making as you just think about it, and not even, a desire to change positions necessarily, but just effectiveness in the work in light of a changing landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely uncertainty around government funding. Like that's real for both direct project work and also broader ecosystem, whether it's utilities and, other private sector actors. So like that squeeze is real and being felt. I think the job to be done hasn't changed though. Like we still need innovative solutions and real execution to meet that simultaneous like affordability, reliability, and sustainability challenge. Um, Big names have backtracked, some initiatives have been rolled back, but I think the work is continuing. Some of it's not here in the US, some of it has moved elsewhere, which is, I think, unfortunate in some ways, but fine in other ways. I guess my advice to myself and also others who are interested in this space is get really clear on what part of the work it is that you're interested in doing. Saying that you want to work in climate it's good. But like try to get a little bit more specific. You don't have to commit to it forever, just like get a little bit more specific for now. And then be clear-eyed about how motivations and language might have shifted in the past few years. and then just try to meet people where they are. There's probably still work going on that's interesting and relevant to the goals that align with yours. It might be talked about differently. People's motivations might be a little bit more transparent, but there's still probably a way that you can get involved. So that's my general advice.
Yeah, I agree with all of those points. I think in terms of other trends, the policy piece has been a little bit challenged, where some incentives or funding structures that we thought were going to move forward have been pulled back or modified. And that's certainly a challenge because it makes that investment decision much harder to reach for a company. But there are areas where we're still seeing progress. I know advanced nuclear is one. Geothermal, like you mentioned, is another area. Carbon management overall, whether that's looking at things like methane management or CO2 use and sequestration without getting too in the weeds of different technologies, are all areas of interest, and projects are moving forward. I would say in terms of advice, it's understanding where you have a competitive advantage is really important. And that's one thing that we try and do in our region, is understanding what is the existing landscape of assets and infrastructure. And so what are those things that are naturally suited to deploy first? And then the second piece is just, we had an annual meeting and our chair spoke and kind of gave this great quote that said, in Houston, we don't choose sides, we choose solutions. And I think that that's great for anybody working in climate. I think we can do ourselves a disservice sometimes by saying, this technology is cleaner than that technology, and that's why it's better. And we can kind of get into the business of assigning almost climate worthiness to various methods of production for key products. And that's just not always helpful, I think. So overall, to sum up, I would say, kind of being clear on your message, the benefits of it, and then that path to market entry is critically important.
Great. Thank you all for those reflections. And as we kind of wind down the moderated portion and we'll move into Q&A, there's some great questions popping up in the chat here. What's one piece of advice that you would share with anyone, regardless of their age or their career, who may be seeking to do their part around climate change?
I think if you're looking to do change in your personal life, it's kind of like classic goal setting. So pick, one or three things that feel meaningful to you and that you can actually follow through on. I think, your personal footprint, no, it's not enormous, in the grand scheme of things, but it can be smaller. And if you tell people what you're doing and why, you can make it easier for other people around you to take the same or similar actions. So that's where personal action starts to compound. If you're thinking about a climate career, kind of similar to what I said before, there's a lot of careers in climate that aren't labeled as such, especially right now. So if you can get more specific than just climate, maybe it's greening the grid or electrifying end uses. I have joked, but I stand by this, that it does not have to be rational. Like, you will just love one technology more than another. That's fine. If you're really into geothermal, you're really into geothermal. But if you can get specific, and then find people that are working in that space and then figure out how your particular skills fit in, like, ta-da, that's a climate career. And if you're trying to elbow your way into a startup, a tip I got was, if you're talking to a founder, ask them, what's a question that you've been wanting to dig into but haven't had the time? Kind of gives you an indication of where future opportunities exist. And also, if you have time to do free work for a founder, go dig into that question for them and come back. And you'll be immediately useful.
Oh, that's great advice. I love all of those points. I think the only other thing I would add is just finding something that you can uniquely add, that you're good at it. And it could be a whole variety of things. Maybe you're just really good at financial audits, and companies need that. And so it doesn't have to be necessarily the direct, very clear impact, but just kind of what are you good at, and then what can you do to help.
So I love engaging with alums who are continuing to reflect on those issues throughout the years and decades after Davidson. And maybe, Mary, going back to your question, I'm moving into the chat now. Thanks everyone for the questions you've submitted, and feel free to continue to submit those. Or if you prefer not to use the chat and want to raise your hand, we can also call on you that way. But there's a question about, going to your point, Mary, about getting specific is the language you used. I think the person asking the question is talking about how, when in the arc of it gaining experience, to try to move from generalists to specialists. So rather, more so than choosing a technology here, the person references like carbon accounting or environmental law. So maybe for perhaps a student who's still really thinking broadly, at what point do you recommend they really start honing in on what kind of impact they want to try to make?
Well, I will give probably a flaky answer. So someone who accepted a job with Accenture my senior fall, and then was in their utility practice, but then senior spring took literary fiction and thought, crap, I probably should go to law school, and then didn't. It's never too late. I would say talk to people who are actually doing those specific things so that you can get more of a fix on kind of like the types of personalities that you'll run into if you're in that kind of career, and what motivates people. I think it's hard to know what your colleagues and mentors could be like, but getting an early glimpse of that can help. This might be bad advice too, but like if you're talking to someone in a very specific field and you might be interested in that, just say you're interested in that specific field. Like they're not going to go and check with the next person you have a coffee chat with. It's fine. But I
So
think
many rule followers here, though,
I wish I'd had this advice because I genuinely thought, I don't know, like someone was going to come audit me. But it's helpful to be as specific as possible, but indicate that you're still in like an exploratory phase. That's my advice. And careers are long, like you'll take fun shifts. That's kind of where career adventures come in. So if you sense that you're really interested in something, get specific for a while, you can usually zoom out again, and take a hard turn.
Anything to add on that one, Sophia?
No, I agree. I do think before you make a very significant investment like going to law school or something, it is helpful to kind of be able to talk with a number of people and get some good advice about, is that the right investment for you or not, particularly if you would personally have to invest quite a bit of your own personal capital into that. And so so that's kind of my main caveat on that. But otherwise, I would say, careers are not linear, or very rarely are. There are some chemical engineers I know who've gone from kind of being an entry-level engineer to a supervising engineer to a, who have made that just ladder progression that's nice and neat, but most often it's not. And so I don't think you need to worry too much. I do agree with Mary's advice about being specific. I know one of the most vexing questions when I was at Davidson that everybody asked me whenever I came home was, so what do you want to do with your English major? And that's kind of a hard question to answer, especially I think coming from Davidson. I would kind of say, well, here's what I'm good at, and I could do a lot of different things. But unfortunately, sometimes when you're talking with people for advice and networking, it's helpful if you can kind of point them in a direction a little bit that narrows the field.
Absolutely. This one also asks you to kind of go back. I know it's been a little while that you've been out working in the field, but if you can transport to, soon after commencement and you're transitioning from what this person types as the Davidson bubble into the professional sustainability space, what was a key element of culture shock that you experienced? And perhaps related, I may try and bundle a different question in that, you may want to tie in here later. people are asking about like, how do you continue to learn on the job? I think that comes up with me a lot with students. Like they think they're so used to the classroom environment for learning. And so once you're actually out in the professional space, what does that look like to continue learning about new, technologies and topics?
I have one that's kind of embarrassing, but it's 100% true. Maybe it was just listening to too much Dolly Parton, but I genuinely thought that my day began at 9. Um, and I would walk to part of it, I was walking to my client's office, not actually the Accenture office, and there was a little bit more of a culture of getting in at like 8:30, 8:45. No one told me. I think it took me a couple of months to be like, oh, I'm like genuinely late. Like this is bad. This is a bad look. So your day does not usually start at 9 unless it explicitly starts at 9. It probably starts at 8. And honestly, if you're an analyst, it probably starts at like 7:45. That was culture shock. Um, oh, I'm trying to think. I think, Sophia, you hinted at this before, but like the transitioning into business writing, and how like ideas and concepts are explained in a business setting. Um, I was probably a stubborn intern, so I had to relearn this as an analyst, but like you put your key point up front. It's really fun to tell a story, but unfortunately, in a business setting, you kind of just get to it. I remember being really annoyed by that and then just conforming, and things got a bit easier. Um, that was a little bit of a shock.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say Davidson is a very special place, and you love it and you appreciate it, and you miss it after you leave. I remember being a student and hearing alums say, "Oh, I just wish I could come back." You're just in this special time in your life, and when you're in it, sometimes yes, you feel that way, but you can also feel like I'm just so overwhelmed and busy. So, so I would say that in terms of transitioning into the working world, there's pluses and minuses. Every place has a culture though, so you will figure out that next culture and where you do well with it and where you're challenged by it. I think also in terms of thinking through how you continue to learn, I would say the difference is nobody really hands you a syllabus. Perhaps a little bit when you were working in consulting, you go through a boot camp, but there is no syllabus, and so you have to be much more involved in setting the direction of what you need to be learning. One thing we do at our company is we kind of set professional development goals for every employee, and so if you can kind of think through for yourself, what's my professional development goal for this year? It can be things like conferences or taking a formal course or just learning from a list of different people. There's a lot of different ways to do it. It's just expect that it's more self-guided and initiated.
Yep. And I realized I mentioned how I learned to like show up on time and write an email, but not anything about professional development beyond that. Um, keep reading a lot. Like you're going to come out of Davidson just used to reading like a ton of pages. Don't lose that skill. Like if you're curious about something, read the whole article and then read another one. Another tip that someone gave me was if you're at an organization where if you send an email to someone just out of curiosity because you want to learn more about what they're doing, like think about the org that you're at and what doors that opens. Like you probably have the opportunity to talk to really interesting people outside of your organization because of a role that you sit in, or because of the ending that your email like domain has. Like make use of that while it's available to you, whether you're a Davidson student or if you're cutting checks for Wells Fargo for grants. Like you can meet some really interesting people and learn some interesting things through conversation as well as reading. So think about, kind of who you have access to.
That's great. And I know we're kind of winding down on time now, so I'm trying to see if I can aggregate these questions. I like this one. You've talked about your own experience as folks navigating the job, landscape. If you've had the opportunity to hire, what do you look for in candidates and what pushes someone over the top for even hiring?
To my last point, I like to ask people, what are you reading or listening to, and how do you stay sharp? It's kind of a test of, are you genuinely curious about what you'd be doing in this role? And even if you're not, can you fake it well enough to know what the relevant publications and podcasts and whatnot are? Also gives me kind of a sense of like what is their genuine curiosity and interest in this? So if you're reading or listening to things, like give yourself credit. People like to hear about those things in interviews.
So I'm hiring right now, and it's an interesting process, of course. I would say that one thing that I like to do is ask kind of a scenario-based question that's relevant to the actual work that the person would be doing. And so um, it's I find it helpful, and I've been asked these in interviews because it gets somebody to think in real time, develop a response, and you also get a little bit of an insight into how they make decisions and architect a plan. And so I think that has been really helpful for me. A lot of folks are accustomed to the tell me about a time when you were challenged question, and can kind of rehearse that a little bit. And a scenario gives you just a little bit more insight and reaction time in the meeting.
Makes sense. Yeah, good tips for those who may be interviewing soon. Nick, did you want to maybe ask a question out loud here?
Yes. And first, I want to thank both panelists for obviously taking the time to talk to us today. Um, I want to I want to ask about something that you, Mary, like mentioned before, especially during your tenure at Wells Fargo.
Yep.
Um, and you talked about how like the sustainability initiatives were kind of hidden, but with kind of like the energy transition coming more and more to the forefront, and also like these projects being very capital intensive with like a lot of money poured into them, like why were they not marketed more, and why were they kind of like in the closet and you had to go bring them out of the attic to
Yeah. Yeah, so I think for Wells, the specific issue, because there was a lot of sustainability work that was happening at Wells Fargo, like way before I stepped into the role and before there was a formal sustainability team.
Mhm.
It was focused on the bank's own footprint. So, how much water are we using at our buildings? Do we have renewable energy contracts set up so that we can like offset some of our own emissions? But what the missing link had been like, what does Wells Fargo do? It's a financial services provider. It has clients.
Mhm.
Realizing that like, aha, those clients have their own climate imperatives or goals. And if we're not the bank of choice for meeting those needs, they're going to go somewhere else. That's where kind of this new centralized team was stood up. So I think what I've seen happen is a lot of times you've got really, really smart people doing great work. But because it's focused on maybe like operational sustainability in an organization, that is the kind of work that can unfortunately get kind of hidden in a corner or put on a shelf, which stinks because then when it comes time for sustainability to be like the hot topic for like the main stage, like serving clients, making money, a lot of the people that were doing that operational sustainability work should be tapped on because they can speak with a lot of intelligence and experience to what those clients needs. So that's kind of what I saw. I've seen it happen in other organizations too. Um, Sometimes you'll find now sustainability people that are kind of like hidden within business organizations because companies don't want to have like a target on their back for political reasons. So if you have like a centralized sustainability team, it's like, look, they're doing sustainability. And if you kind of like hide them throughout, the same job gets done. Frankly, it might be harder to get done if you're there. But that's what I see. Hopefully that answers your question, Nick.
Mhm. No, no, absolutely.
Okay,
Very
cool.
helpful. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. And I have one final one if y'all have like a sentence, right, or a phrase here. So there's a question about this work that you're doing being heavy. And I think, Mary, you've talked a little bit about curiosity. This person's term I like, it's the optimistic curiosity that Davidson likes to cultivate, right? So let's hope that you all feel like you are maintaining optimistic curiosity. And if you are, what's a strategy that you're using to do that in light of heavy work?
Get information from a lot of sources. If you read one publication, you're probably going to feel down, or you'll feel really optimistic, and you shouldn't feel that optimistic. If you continue to be a critical reader and pay too much in subscriptions or pay what feels like the right amount, you'll probably have a balanced view and also an appropriate sense of optimism.
Anything to take us
Yeah,
home with you?
I would say that there's a many battles to fight between a press release announcing a project and the project actually commencing construction and then commencing operations. So that can be challenging for people to, or daunting, or make you feel a little jaded. At the same time, though, I feel like if you're focused on a lot of the fundamentals, you can bring that project forward, and you can find the pivots along the way of how it may need to shift to meet the new market realities. So I guess there's an inherent optimism in there, but I think there's been a lot that's talked about investment dollars. Where are they? Are they up? Are they down? And over time, what we've found is that the projects that can really make it still do. So have hope.
Great. Thank you both so much. Judith, do you want to close this out with any final words?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mary. Thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you so much, Yancey. So grateful for all of you taking the time to speak with us tonight and leading us in this really informative and engaging conversation. Really grateful for your just raw honesty, and just sharing, and being vulnerable to share so many parts of you and what you're doing and have done. For all of our folks on the call tonight, a follow-up email, I think Yancey might have mentioned this, will be sent tomorrow with some contact information for Yancey and her office, and a myriad of the things that she mentioned earlier in the call, including a link to the conference that or the event that she had mentioned in the fall, as well as how to reach Mary and Sophia as well. There'll also be a short survey and some other information. This program was recorded tonight, and it will be available on our website within the next few days. And so definitely feel free to look out for that, to either go back and listen to any parts that you found particularly interesting and want to revisit, and or if you want to share with others who you think might be interested, please feel free. And again, we just want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and we hope that you have a great rest of your night. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.